Good evening and welcome to this evening's webinar, Collegiate Men of Color, Changing the Narrative in Higher Education. I'm David Hahn, Associate Dean for Academic Affairs, and I'll be serving as the technical producer for this evening's event. My colleague, Tina Giorgio, the college's Director of Communications and Alumni Relations, will moderate our chat. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce the college's Vice President for Academic Affairs, Humphrey Crookendale, who would formally like to welcome you to this evening's event. Vice President Crookendale.
Good evening and thank you, David. I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of the participants to this very important discussion. I am so proud of the MCNY community. Last night, one of our alums and now a professor spearheaded what was a remarkable celebration and commemoration of Juneteenth. And tonight, through the leadership of Michael, we are now going to be embarking on an important topic on collegiate men of color and changing the narrative. And this is such a fundamentally important question to have right now in the public debate, as we know there is such a disparity of men of color in institutions of higher education, so that we can have this discussion to begin to further a much more informed way of addressing this issue is such an important initiative. So I want to salute Michael for taking this important issue on. I welcome all of you to Metropolitan College of New York. This is the institution that is not afraid to be out there on the cutting edge of issues that are germane and relevant to our communities. And tonight, this subject is indeed one of those topics. So welcome, and let this be a productive and fruitful event. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on Collegiate Men of Color, Changing the Narrative in Higher Ed. I would first like to thank Vice President Crookendale for joining us and sharing such fine and inspirational words. I would also like to welcome all MCNY staff, faculty, students, and alumni who may be in attendance, and anyone else who has taken the time out of their evening to join us to discuss a topic that has been prevalent for many years and continues to exist across the nation. We are joined this evening by our three esteemed panelists. I was very mindful in selecting the panelists to create a diverse background in our academic journeys. Also, we have the benefit of having two panelists and myself who either teach at the collegiate level and or work in student affairs. This allows for us to share our personal experience and also those we have encountered professionally. So let's begin with Sam Smith, an MCNY MPA alum and case manager and supervisor at Black Veterans for Social Justice. We have with us Joshua Perez, MBA, who was employed at MCNY for a while, about over 8 years or so, as Assistant Director of Admissions, Director of the MCNY Bronx Campus, Adjunct Professor, and now he currently is the Associate Director of Admissions at BMCC. And last but definitely not least, Christian Williams, as a master's from Columbia University, where he serves as an adjunct professor and is the Brooklyn region representative to Governor Andrew Cuomo. And again, I'm Mike Goodwin. I am a two-time alum, my undergrad in human services in 2012 and my MPA in 2013. I serve as adjunct professor, and I am the president of human services and vice president, president of the human services and vice president of the alumni networks. And I will be your moderator for this evening. Okay, first, I would like to begin by having our panelists briefly share their pathway to higher education as a student. How did you get into higher ed? What was your path becoming a student in higher ed? I will start with Christian. I can safely assume that you are the youngest member of the panel. If I am not mistaken, did you do the more traditional route from high school to college? And if so, what was the factors that prompted that process?
Yes, thank you again for this opportunity to be here. It's such an honor with the esteemed panelists, you as a moderator, MCNY. So thank you again. It's an honor. To answer your question, yes, I did do the traditional route from high school to college. And I'm sure if my mom's listening, probably one of the first words I probably ever said was college, because all I remember as a kid is that my mom really talked about the importance of higher education, and my grandmother as well, who was an educator, executive director at a daycare center in Brooklyn. And so just that lineage was the motivating factor. So I graduated from high school. I had the wonderful opportunity to go to St. John's University for 4 years. Shout out to my Red Storm colleagues. Throughout that process, I was president of student government. My senior year was a wonderful experience where I got to work with all of the student organizations, school leadership, et cetera. I really learned a lot. I like to say when I went to St. John's, I was still a boy in a sense. And when I graduated, I was a young man, young adult. And I learned a lot. The experiences there, working, I worked there. I was a student there. I really feel like I grew so much in those 4 years. I found out who I was as a person. I got to work with people from different walks of life, different religions, different perspectives. It was such a culturally enriching environment. And after that, I applied for Columbia in the Negotiation Conflict Resolution Program. And this was a different step because I had a bachelor's degree in political science. I have a minor in theology. And now I'm studying the opposite side of how to facilitate and sustain reconciliation amongst disagreeable parties. And it was definitely a different perspective there, but nonetheless, it was a great experience. So yes, I had the more traditional route via my mom, my grandmother, my family encouraged me to go to college. And that experience, I think, helped shape me in how I both approach going to school and then also my experiences afterwards.
That's incredible. Thank you so very much. There's a lot gained from that. So Joshua Perez, what was your path to higher education? What did that look like?
Well, thank you, Michael, for the great question and for allowing me to be here. So I'll definitely kind of start off with saying, similar to Christian's experience, my mom, you might as well have tattooed it on me when I came out of her, because I knew that I had to go to college, and I also knew I had to surpass the bar that my mother set, which was getting her master's in social work. So I knew at minimum I needed a master's degree. I did take the traditional route. I attended St. Raymond's High School for 2 years and then graduated from Lehman High School in 2 more years, and then essentially attended Manhattanville College up in Purchase, New York. What made this interesting for me was that I dormed. So I actually kind of flew away from the nest, which was very hard for my mother and I, but it was something that we needed to do and I needed to do. And it was hard at first, but I would say I enjoyed my experiences. Now, I did come in thinking I was going to be a marriage and family counselor. That was my goal, believe it or not. And I took intro to psychology in a large lecture hall with about 90 students, and quickly realized that that was not for me. And I was honest with myself, but then I also had a passion for music and business. So then I pursued a degree in music management. And then I took a music theory course. And that became a little more difficult because I was not from a musical background. I was more of a DJ, music producer, versus some of the students in my class who were playing piano since they were 3 years old. So imagine how I felt in that classroom. But then essentially I found that perfect balance where I majored in management and minored in music, graduated with my bachelor's. I worked a recruitment job for about a year for a very small college within the Bronx neighborhood. And then essentially told myself, I want more, I want to do better. And I walked into Mercy College asking about my master's degree and how I could pursue my MBA in general management. And within that conversation, I got very lucky. And the person who I was speaking to was also a recruiter, but also a very important staff member there, who offered me a job as a recruiter. which would enable me to get my master's degree for free. And to this day, she's one of my mentors, and it's one of the biggest blessings in my life, because I think from there, everything started to click, along with my mom, like breathing down my neck, because I am older now, but she still holds me accountable to these goals and to these, you know, these things that I'm supposed to accomplish as a young man. So it was never a question in my mind that college was the option. There was really no other option. As harsh as that may sound, my mom created that path and made sure when I did fall off, because believe me, I did, she put me back on that track. So while on the traditional path, there were a lot of things that kind of threw me off, but led me to where I am today. So I'm definitely grateful. And, you know, that was my path. And essentially I obtained everything, but not in the way that I wrote it down. So
Exactly. Yeah, and that's, trust me, that's kind of common, as it is for me. And then I'll share mine briefly. You know, did well in K through 10 and just started drifting once I got into 11 and 12. I actually ended up dropping out of high school and got my GED. I had a music scholarship waiting for me at Mississippi Valley State and went down there and stayed a year. And I just continued to feel like, okay, school wasn't for me. And not that I didn't, you know, do well. I did exceptionally well in school. I just didn't have the focus, I guess, or maturity at that time. And then came back, worked for many years. As I say, I danced around a few colleges, went here, went there. And then eventually in 2009, I said, okay, enough of this. I need to get my degrees. You know, did well in my profession, but I didn't have those degrees, you know, and it started creating blocks for me as I needed to advance in various positions. And they were like, oh, you don't have a master's? You don't have a bachelor's? No. Oh, I'm sorry. I see your experiences there, but you don't have the degrees. And that led me to MCNY, where I got my undergrad, as I mentioned, in human service and my master's in public administration. You know, and it definitely was a process for me to get myself back on track. But really, it was what was needed to advance in the fields that I was working in. You know, I hit the ceiling with no degree. You know, so you know, that pretty much was my process. Now, Sam, unlike Christian, unlike Joshua, I guess. Your path to gain your undergrad degrees differed. Your circumstances for many were the same why they did not pursue a degree, but you were different. Please share where and why you got your associates and bachelors.
So before I begin that, I would like to first thank you, Professor Goodwin, or Pro as I like to call you, for giving me the opportunity and for helping me to achieve my master's degree in public administration in 2016. My path is all the way different. I was incarcerated at the time I began college. I was incarcerated. At this time, I had been in and out of prison, so this was about roughly my 20th year in prison. I was in the yard, and for most people that don't know, they think that when you go to prison, prison is just this place where all these corrective measures take place, and it's not. There was a bunch of everything else going on, and I was involved in the bunch of everything else. So a situation happened where I was getting ready to get into an altercation with someone, and I knew that this altercation would lead to me either killing him or me being killed. But however it ended, I was going to die in prison, because if I killed him, I was never getting out. If I got killed right then I was still never getting out. And I knew that I had to do something different. I just didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. So I had an associate that when he seen me and he seen the confusion, for lack of a better word, in me, he said, hey, why don't you take the entrance exam to Hudson Link? Hudson Link is the college program that they have in Sing Sing Correctional Institution. So why don't you take this entrance exam for Hudson Link? I took the entrance exam for Hudson Link. I passed and I began going to school. Hudson Link worked in conjunction with Mercy College. So what happened is that I gained my associates. Took me 2 years, I gained my associates. After another 2 years, I gained my bachelor's. But at the time I was gaining my bachelor's, I was also being paroled. So I had also came home. So when I came home, my circumstances are different. Now I have an education. So now the way that I used to view things prior to my education is not how I view them anymore. I see different things. I'm starting to learn how to adjust the narrative and take the narrative and change it, so to speak, or become at least a part of the change, no matter how big or how small. And when I got the bachelor's, I realized that it wasn't really enough. I needed to go to another level. And I wanted to get into a field or receive a degree where I could be impactful, where I could have a part in developing processes and procedures, in developing rules, and developing everything administratively to be a part of it. So I came to MCNY and got my degree in public administration, because one of the things that I learned from being in prison was that when it comes to the law, if you don't know the law, and ignorance of the law is never an excuse that you can use. So in administration and knowing the rules of things, if I know them and I'm working from inside, I know how to better develop, better help, and better assist people like myself and other people, especially from the Black and brown communities or even other underserved communities. And so I was fortunate enough to where I landed with Professor Goodwin, who was my professor. So he was with me from day one until the end, until walking down. And Professor Goodwin, I shared my experience with him. I shared my experience with my cohorts. And what Professor Goodwin did help me to do was to take my experience and mesh it with my education in order to produce a hybrid product that had both experience in real life and in theory and education, to be a better producer and a better factor in the things that I wanted to do. So that's how it came about for me.
And we all applaud you. I'm seeing the chats, man. Everyone's like big ups to your process. And again, many have been in that situation, but unfortunately did not follow the path you followed. And we commend you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me start with this. According to the National Center for Educational Statistics, 33% of Black males graduated with an associate degree, 36% graduated with a bachelor's in 2015 to 2016, which is the lowest of all ethnicities. However, Black women had a 67% associates and 74% completion rate, which is number one. So you have Black men at the bottom, Black women at the top. During the same time frame, 38% of Hispanic males graduated with an associate's degree and 40% with a bachelor's. However, Hispanic women, 62% with an associate's and 60%. So what we find is that when we look at specific ethnicities, we see where we have the men at the bottom or more struggling and the women with respect or not. But however, when we look at other ethnicities, we have white males reach to 40% associates and 44% bachelors. Asian males top at 44% with associates and 46%. And this is the basis for what we're going to talk about today, is the disparity, the variance between, Black and Latino men who are into college and who don't complete versus other ethnicities, as well. Now, these numbers, there's a number of contributing factors which influence these results. So tonight we're going to touch on just a few of them, and let's start with the racial inequities and implicit bias. I have a friend whose son, a Black male, attended a well-known university in Pennsylvania. And this university is known nationally for sports, for a sports program. He did not participate on the sports team, but was a recipient of a partial academic scholarship. However, everyone asked him when he went to class and walk in the halls, what team you played for, which team you played for. See, the fact that he attended this university, was a Black male, but was not an athlete, was surprising. You know, and I just wanted to throw this in there, and I'll be real quick with this. And this is really looking at the Black athlete, you know, and really men of color in that respect. In 2012, the Black student population in UCLA and USC remained less than 5%. However, 43% of the football team roster was Black, and 80% of them were starters. 90% of the men's basketball team were Black, and 100% of them were starters. However, that did not result necessarily in high graduation rates. You had, in 2013, 21 of the 68 teams that completed in the NCAA basketball tournament had a graduation rate of less than 50%. So what I'm making a reference to is, even though we may watch college sports, we may see men of color out there very much engaged, but that doesn't necessarily represent the college overall, nor does that necessarily represent the fact that they will graduate. You know, once they reach their eligibility, a 4-year eligibility of playing time, they're done, whether they have a degree or not. You know, some go on to pro and some do not. All right, just wanted to throw that in there. Another male friend of mine, Hispanic male from the Bronx, went to NYU. He stated how not much was said about his excelling in classes, but was asked by other ethnicities, since you're from the Bronx, you're Spanish, so you know where to get good weed from? And that was the questions posed to him. There lies implicit racism. My son's friend from the College of Pennsylvania ended up dropping out because he left his academic scholarship and left because he just couldn't take it. And the guy at NYU stayed, but encountered many issues as well. You know, so with that, I want to go to Christian. You attended St. John's and Columbia University. Columbia University prides itself on having a diverse student body, but does that remove any issues of racism and implicit bias? What was your experience going to an Ivy League regarding this issue?
Thank you for the question. I don't think it removes racial bias or implicit bias from, I think it depends on the individual, how they view people and how they view circumstances. Particularly for me, when I went to Columbia, I was in grad school, I was in my early 20s. And so I didn't live on campus like I did when I was at St. John's. So I went to, you know, I was working, you know, I would go there, you know, take my classes, then leave, work, repeat cycle. And so the colleagues that I worked there, I didn't necessarily experience racism, but what I did experience was competition. You know, especially your first semester, you're in Columbia, some folks was feeling themselves like, I want to show how smart I am. And that's fine. I mean, you know, part of that is when you have ongoing conversations about debating. We had class on mediation, had classes on advanced conflict, advanced negotiations, etc. It can get high-spirited conversations. That's putting it mildly. But I think my experience there is, you know, was somewhat different than St. John's. St. John's, I went there for 4 years. I lived on campus. I did have a great experience, but there were instances where folks in my encounters may have said highly ignorant statements or just flat out racist. I don't think that was indicative of the whole student body, not at all. But there were individual circumstances where I feel like I still experienced that. And so I think by going through that at certain times at St. John's, and then I think it prepared me for graduate school. I was a little older, a little more seasoned in what I wanted to do, et cetera. What I wanted to just add to your point about education and graduation rates, completion rates for men of color. I believe this issue actually dates back early, in early childhood. I think it's critical that, and I'm just speaking as a Black man and men of color, right? I think it's important that our men of color receive the support and guidance and letting them know that education is a powerful tool to their well-being, not just because they're going to get a degree that says I graduated from X, but because it provides you freedom to be able to explore opportunities and be successful, right? And so well, not only do I believe, I know it starts as a child, having that ingrained and be supported. I also think it's important that our men of color are mentored and have people that look like them in leadership positions in academia, because I think it's important. It's easier to share experiences when you see someone across the room from you that looks like you. You feel more confident, you feel more comfortable sharing those experiences. So I think all of those are factors that might come into play. I also think that individuals, men of color, and I'll just end with this, are also what isn't described in the statistics or what they're dealing with when they're also in college. Some of them are working, they're the breadwinners for their families. They may not always be in the best economic circumstance. And so though when they're in school, it may be the main focus, when they're not, they're dealing with some real life situations. And it's difficult. And so we need to support our men that are in school and trying to make it work and trying to help their families, et cetera. And I think when we do that, you will see graduation rates go higher, you will see incomes go higher. All of those factors are a correlation to success.
Well said. Well said, definitely. Joshua, what is your take on this?
So just kind of thinking about some of the things that were said, I did not go to an Ivy League, but I went to Manhattanville College, which was about an hour away. So not too far, White Plains, Westchester area. And I recall stepping on campus, and I'm no tough guy, no street kid. I would never give that off. But, you know, I liked my fashion. I'm from the Bronx. I like my Jordans. I like my, at that time, big t-shirts were in. I had my nice chain, my tape up. My hair was like all over the place, blowout. But I was just me. That was me. That was what I enjoyed. It wasn't to give off any type of energy. And some of the first things I heard were, "Ooh, you're from the Bronx? You're tough. Are you a drug dealer? Are you this? Are you that?" A lot of these questions that back then I thought were funny, but in a sense were very ignorant. And then judging from who they came from, it could have had a big toll on me and an effect. But I guess my innocence, my ignorance, I just kind of, hey, I'm here, I made it, I'm in the building, and I'm gonna make it happen. I even would wear shorts with a hoodie, flip-flops, socks. "Oh, you're on the baseball team. You're Spanish, you're Dominican, you play baseball, right?" No, I'm actually here to be a musician. I'm actually here to study music theory. Now, when I'm in my music class, I have people playing piano for 3 years. Imagine the conversations I'm having with them. I was told that I'm not a musician, and DJing and songwriting and music production is not traditional music. Where do we feel that's true? I don't know. To me, music is music, art is art, creativity is creativity. So a lot of those things that kind of brought me down and made me question, like, am I good enough to do this? Should I be doing this? Should I study music? Do I belong here? Should I have went to the local school in the city and not kind of jumped the bar and kind of pressured myself? So I definitely experienced a lot of those things. I even had teachers where I would submit certain papers for a philosophy course, and I was asked if I plagiarized or cheated because the paper was so good, and he could not understand how I could grasp philosophy in my freshman year. So I do think it starts very young, but I do think, you know, I agree with Christian. He had a lot of great points. It needs to start early. You mentioned those statistics of women going to school more. There's no coincidence that Christian and I had mothers pushing us to go through that. And it was always, you can be the biggest rap star you want, the biggest producer, but you're going to go to school, because if you have one hit record and you disappear, you're done. You want to play baseball, you break your leg, you tear your ACL, you may not be the same, have that degree. Learn other ways. You know, my stepdad always told me, you don't have to be Kobe Bryant, you don't have to be Reggie Bush, but you can be Kobe Bryant and Reggie Bush in what you're good at. So if you're going to be a professor, be the Kobe Bryant of professors. So I think it's a mentality. It's something that we have to kind of own ourselves and challenge ourselves, and in a way have become Teflon in a way. And I know it's easier said than done, but again, with support, with kind of some of those examples and kind of finding those people. You know, I had a lot of great people that were not Hispanic or not African American that helped me and surprised me. I would have never asked them. and they pushed me forward. So I think we have to start early, and we need to get people like ourselves and people who are not like ourselves as well advocating for us, and becoming educated by us as well. So I think it starts early, and we need to drill down on that early and just continue a fight. And, you know, my mother told me, get this done, but just know it's not going to be easy. And some days were easier than others. So you take it as a challenge, and when you accomplish it, it makes it all even more sweeter. So,
you know, and there's a couple of points you guys raised, and I want to build off both of them. Let me just say this though, as we look at racial inequities as possible factors in poor retention for men of color in higher ed, one might just state going to an HBCU, historically Black college university, is the answer, right? Well, according to National Center for Education Statistics, roughly 12.9% of Black undergrad students attend HBCUs, let me say that again, which in return graduate approximately 21% of Black undergraduates. So that means the remaining 80-something% or 80% attend what we consider to be PWIs, or predominantly white universities. You know, so it's that thought, well, just go to an HBCU and then you don't have to deal with any of that. However, there's still a strong number of you know, Black and Latino and these people of color that do not go to HBCUs. You know, and then I'm going to go into another part where you guys raised. So Jonell Knox, a professor at Bronx Community and College of Staten Island in 2019, referenced this in an article. He said, of the full-time faculty in degree-granting post-secondary institutions in fall of 2018, some 40% were white males, 35% white females, 7% Asian, 5% Asian Pacific, 7% males, Asian Pacific, 5% Asian Pacific females, and 3% Black males, 3% Black females, 3% Hispanic males, and 3% Hispanic females. 80% of college presidents were white males. So when do we, such a large number of faculty that do not look like us, right? Faculty and administration. And this goes way back into K through 12, you know, where we're in classrooms where we see men, but we don't see men that represent us, meant to motivate us, meant to be examples for us in the classroom, you know. So do you feel, and I'll throw this at Sam first, do you feel this creates a challenge with respect to the educator and student relationship, and you know, even in the non-HBCUs, but still predominantly Black institutions and Hispanic serving institutions, there's still not a large number of Black and Hispanic male professors. What's your response to that, Sam?
My response to that is that is correct. And I can see how that happens, because when you're trying to reach and teach somebody and educate somebody, and let me go back to what I learned that the definition of education is, and I learned it from Dr. John Henry Clark. Said education teaches you how to be a responsible handler of power. And one of the things is that when it's not people that look like you or that you can relate to, or you believe that you see it mirrored, it's like a mirror. Because when I look at you, Professor Goodwin, when you were standing in front of the class, it was a mirror of something that I could be. Because though our experiences may not have been identical, they were somewhat similar and relatable in certain aspects. So it was a mirror effect for me. I can be that person. But when I'm constantly looking and I don't have the mirror effect, I'm trying to see, how can I be him? And that's the question that keeps coming in. Well, I can't be like him. He's not like me. He doesn't share the same experience. He doesn't really know what it's like for his dad not to be present. And by not being present, I don't mean not necessarily there in the home, but just not present. because you can be there physically in the home and still not be present. You may not understand what it's like for me to be emotionally unavailable, because from a child, I've been taught to be emotionally unavailable. Because for most of us, especially Black and brown men, as men, we're taught that, hey, stop all that whining. You're not no girl. Stop all that. You're not a female. You're a man. Handle it, handle it, handle it. So we become emotionally stymied, which affects our development. So now, when I'm looking at this class and you're teaching me about emotional intelligence, and you're teaching me psychology, or you're teaching me any of these subject matters, how do I relate to you to give you the chance to be able to break through what's been built up in me for 18 plus years? For some of us, even more years than that, because some of us start college late because of needs that we may have to meet. Some of us have children early in life. Some of us have economic needs that need to be met. So there's an immediate need that we have to meet before we can meet the secondary need of educating ourselves or whatever. And when I'm not in the classroom and I don't see anybody that I can relate to, that I can share that struggle with, because I don't feel like there's any identification, it lessens my interest. I'm not interested, because you cannot draw parallels between my real world and this theoretical world that you're trying to bring me into.
Wow. And it doesn't get any realer than that. There is this, I want to say, this distance that we as men of color feel sometimes, because going back from K through 12, where it never was or rarely was someone up there in front of the class. And remember, teachers are in authoritative positions, right? We're leaders, we're guiders, we have multiple hats. And so now, when I'm in that classroom, remember in the classroom, you're there from what, 8:30 to 3? So there's a big part of the day that you're in the classroom, 5 days a week, okay? So, and as the instructions are given and as the relationship is forming, there still continues to be a barrier, between that relationship, because you don't really hear me. You hear me, but you don't really hear me. You may hear me, but you don't really understand me. So when you say do this and I say do this, you say, okay, I don't understand why that's an issue, because you don't understand the issue. So then that makes it more challenging to open up, more challenging to form the relationship, more challenging to, feel the trust factor, because we have this level of difference sometimes, and again, it's not, and I'm not making this a blanket statement to, everyone. It's just sometimes, again, it's one of the factors that we have to consider in this situation, I don't know if Kristen, did you speak on this some? Because I know, I definitely may want you to add a little on this as well.
Sure. And first of all, I just want to say, Sam, thank you for sharing that. That was profound words. Thank you again. And just to add on that, what I would like to say is that when it comes to the education system, I think, number one, we have to acknowledge that there's an issue. Now, there are colleges and universities, there are K-12 schools, there are graduate and doctoral programs that are doing the right thing. And so the comments that I make are not necessarily applying to them, but overall, we have to admit that the system is broken. And one of the solutions to admitting that a situation is broken is not repeating the same thing over and over again. The foundation is shattered. And what I mean by that is that we are not giving our young men of color, and speaking as a Black man, same opportunities that others have. We have to acknowledge it. We have to change it. We have to do it now. And part of that is early on hiring more men of color in education. That has to be a main priority. And then also for college and university, it's important that we hire men of color into leadership positions. We understand that diversity is an important factor, but now the decision makers who have autonomy to have lasting impact on a college university need to reflect the broader community. When you do that, you will have much more money that is actually spent into our communities, right? If young men and women see college as a beacon for their freedom, and not just something that, oh, I just take a test each and every day and I don't know if I'm going to pass or not. Not that that's the main opinion, but that is opinion that people do share. It'll be a lot more attractive for people to continue on and finish and get that support each and every day. I think that's important. The other thing is, I think overall, we need to start having conversations about having school for longer periods of the year, because every child and adult learns differently. And I know that that's not a 1 year fix. That's going to take some time, so we have to be patient. But I think we have to also talk about the scheduling, how we have our academia for all levels. And so I think all of those are a factor in why you see the numbers the way they are. But it's not something that we can't fix. We just have to want to fix it. And at this point, we must demand it. That's
true.
what I was saying.
So true. We must want to fix it. You touched on something. I want to jump into that. In New York City, the number of Black and Latino males graduating from high school is growing. However, very few meet the New York State Education Department criteria for being college ready. By this standard, among students scheduled to graduate in 2018, only 9% of Black males and 11% of Latino males were considered to be ready for college. And that's a quote by Villavincino in 2013. So does the academic system create a disadvantage? And is there enough support to address this disparity? I'll throw this to you, Joshua.
Thank you, Mike. I'll say one of the largest issues as educational institutions and as educators that we have is we constantly expect students to meet us where we expect them to be versus meeting students where they are. And if that means going into the trenches and understanding, that's what we need to do. And I feel students enter certain environments and feel this pressure to know everything, to understand everything, to fit in. And that creates a big disparity for us. And I think what needs to be put in place is more people that we can relate to, but also more courses that are more relevant and kind of useful to the immediacy of life and success. So if we're teaching what a bank statement is, what investing is like, and why you should do it, these useful tools that you can use right now while gaining this essential education, it kind of, and not to be cliche, but it gives a purpose to your education. And that's one of the best things about MCNY, that the education is purpose-centered. And constantly we're in a math class saying, why am I learning the Pythagorean theorem? Why? Well, if you surround that with a purpose, then students start to click. This is what you use for this. This is what you use for this. How do we understand supply and demand? Well, you have X amount of sneakers, you're reselling them for X amount of money. There's a demand, that's why the price is high. So it's kind of meeting students at that level. And I feel at times as educators, we feel more authority. We have to kind of rule the classroom rather than welcoming others to the classroom and kind of meeting at that level. So I think systems need to be put in place to teach real world skills that will help students be better students and human beings. And then essentially in the end, along this path, you're learning from someone that has been on that path with you, or at least understands that path and can show empathy towards that path. And I think that's another thing that we lack at times is empathy towards each other. And the lack of empathy comes from lack of understanding, lack of education. So that's kind of where I'll leave that. I do think there are great things in place, but I do think there's a lot more work to do with a lot more people in mind.
Agreed. I just want to, so let me ask this question then. Is it cultural? Is it, and I think we kind of touched on that. Cultural meaning, as men of color, are we culturally more inclined to pick work over college? Or do we not value higher education. Is that seems to be the trend, or what we tend to gravitate to. You know, as for myself, as I mentioned, I had a scholarship. I really had a free ride to go through school when I had the music scholarship, but it was like, you know what, I'm not really with this. I'll go home and I'll go to work. And that's exactly what I did. You know, I just felt that to be more productive, right? You know, but I didn't have anyone, and I always make reference of this. I had someone that would have set me down and said, you're a knucklehead, man. You know, you have an opportunity that, you know, many people wish they were able to ascertain. You have this, you know, stay your little knucklehead self in school and get this right, opposed to coming back, I don't know how many, I always use the term 100 years later before, you know, I had to get my degree. So, you know, is it something that we look at, or, you know, and Sam, I want to throw it to you too on this, you know, the value of this degree. You know, as you mentioned in your story, how you got to a point where you saw its true value, you know, so what was the value you placed on the college education, and do we need to do that more as men of color?
Yeah. Couple of things, and it's segue from the last two things that you asked into that is so great, because, and I think it ties together, because one of the things is we find that people consider equality to require you to do less work to get a result, rather than giving you the same tools to do the work with. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And one of the things that I was able to differentiate and see once I obtained my degree was that instead of basing my life and what I felt was success around the quantity of materials that I was able to accumulate, I started basing it on the quality of life that I had. And that was something that I had to learn. I had to begin to differentiate in, because for many of us, especially those of us that come from households where there may been a struggle to meet basic needs or immediate needs, there's an overwhelming sense to overcompensate and accumulate all of these things and have all of these things that I may not have had the chance to have before. So as opposed to quality, I want quantity. And the way that I can get quantity is by immediately meeting needs, immediately going to work, immediately finding me streams of income, immediately being able to have money on hand. Because for most of us, we didn't get passed on inheritances of land or monetary inheritances. We inherited struggle. We inherited a lack of emotional intelligence, but one of the greatest things that we inherited was the ability to keep the work going, was the ability to go ahead, to push through, to just keep navigating. My degree gave me the sense that all the things that I had put value on weren't valuable. They could be traded and sold. They could be bought. They could be bartered for. But what the degree gave me was the ability to say, I have something that now I can make somebody compensate me for what I have. I have something that gives me the ability to sit down and talk with people instead of being talked at by people. So it gave me, my degree is invaluable. There's no amount of money that I can put on it. So even the student loan that I may have incurred and acquired because of the degree, nothing can match up to what the degree has given me and the possibilities that the degree has given me and the doors that the degree has opened. The degree gives me the ability to walk in somewhere and they say, Samuel Smith, MPA. No, it gives me the ability for when people refer to me, they refer to me as a reference point or as a person who's knowledgeable. Oh, let's refer to Mr. Smith. What does Mr. Smith have to say? And the degree gives me the value to be taken into account instead of being a bystander. Because a lot of times we sacrifice being a bystander in the name of economics. So I can just be a consumer. I can just be a consumer. And instead of saying, hey, you know what? I don't want to be a consumer. I don't need to be a consumer. I need to be a provider. And it's not just a provider in the sense of myself, but a provider for my people. And that's when we have teachers and educators that look like us and that resemble us, that share our experience. They become providers for our people, and they help to build up and bring up and raise more providers.
Joshua, I see your head nodding like crazy. So what do you want to add on this before I move forward?
I think Sam he's just knocking it out of the park right now, like Barry Bonds. So I'll just kind of add on to that. You know, I think it's understanding that, and Christian said this earlier as well, it's understanding that education is your freedom. It's your ticket to freedom. It's your ticket to empowerment. You know, an example I was thinking of as Sam was speaking is, you know, I had a lot of friends that were really good at basketball. I mean, they probably could have played in the league, but they didn't have that ticket, that degree to get into the NBA. And I feel a degree gets you into those rooms that for any other reason you would not be allowed into. You know, that degree allows you to break glass ceilings. And that's the most important thing. And just thinking back to my childhood, when I would see kind of like the cool guys on the block with the big chains and a nice car, my mom would say, you can have that too, but this is how you're going to do it. This is your ticket to getting that. And you're not going to go this route because this is what, are you ready for that? Because if that's the route you want, I'm going to be honest with you, are you ready for it? So my mom gave me a dose of reality. You know, my mom worked in Rikers Island as a case manager, brought me to her job. I met people and it was great people, you know, so it's putting that reality in front of us very young, but then kind of, these are your two paths. This is the fork in the road before you even get there. This is where you should go, and this is why. So I think, you know, having that visual of obtain this, get this, this is the end goal, I think will help us. And I think at times, because of economics, because of the pressures of, I grew up in a single parent household. I saw my mom working 2 jobs, making dinner, tired, struggling. And I'm sitting there as a kid, oh, I'm thinking that's expected. And as I get older, I'm like, wait, I gotta help mom. I want chicken, I want pork chops tonight. I'm gonna buy these pork chops if she don't wanna buy them. So learning to empower myself, but I at least had someone to keep me at bay and say, I appreciated my son, but there's a bigger picture at the end. When you accomplish that, you know, now I can actually help my mom on a larger scale. So just kind of thinking ahead, sort of like Sam said, and just plowing through all of that. So.
Very good. There's something else I want to ask. Let me ask this question. There are a number of men of color who have academic prowess to complete, right? College, and even I'll throw it to you, Christian, too, at an Ivy League, right? On an Ivy League level, but feel that they may not make it or the level, they can't match up to the level of expectation. You know, so what we look at sometimes is imposter syndrome, right? The fact that I don't think I belong here. And I think, Joshua, you made reference to that at some point at the college you went to for your undergrad. I don't think I belong here. I don't think I should be here. I don't think I'm capable or good enough as I sit in the classroom with all these highly educated, or nah, this is not for me. Let me get out of here. right? So I want to ask you, Christian, how did you feel sitting in the classroom, and your experiences on that level?
Thank you for the question. I've definitely felt like I belong there academically. So I didn't have the aspect that I wouldn't be able to compete. Matter of fact, I was saying not only do I belong there, but I'm valuable. And I know what I can bring to the table. And I know that my ideas can help shift conversations. So for people to see things in a more holistic aspect. And when I was in Columbia, I'll just be honest with you, there wasn't too many Black men in my program. Wasn't a lot of Black men on campus. And I felt I could do two things. I could get frustrated, which happens, yes. Or I could say, I'm going to take this opportunity to transform how people, not because when people look at you, when they don't see people like you, they often have opinions of you in about 30 seconds, maybe even faster than that. And so I knew it was important how I carried myself, how I answered questions, how I studied, how I would do presentations was an opportunity to let people know there's more people out there like me. I'm not the only one doing this. I have support, I have encouragement, I'm just as talented. And you know what? I'm going to continue to go on and do bigger things. And I'm going to use this opportunity, which I'm grateful to be here, to springboard for my career. And just to kind of reiterate what, thank you, Sam and Josh, for what you were saying before. Again, it's an honor to be here. By me teaching at Columbia, what works, I teach with a talented, another professor as well, Betsy Keaton. We both graduated from the program. And so, yeah, the class is called Analyzing Conflict Analysis. We take, it's one of the final courses in the program, and it's how to properly dissect data to use towards your theory of what you're trying to resolve the conflict with. The reason why that class is successful and the reason why the students respond well, maybe I'm biased speaking, but I think it's successful, is because Bessie and I both graduated from the program. She graduated in 2013, I graduated in 2015. We were able to actually provide, it's the little moments that says, you know, when I was in the program, I focused on this helped or this didn't help. Maybe you spend time writing your literature review like this. Those parts are actually real tangible tools that the students can see and be like, maybe I can apply this in real time right now in my job. And because of that, and they see someone that looks like myself and my colleague, I know it's able to frame how they view their experiences once they graduate. And if people see that more often, you'll have more men of color in academia that'll be able to teach and shape the minds of the next generation. Because really what education does, and it's to piggyback off what Josh and Sam says, is it gives you a framework of how you should approach life, right? You study, you work hard, you graduate, you move on to the next thing, right? Now it's not as always as simplistic as that, right? There's different things that come around, but it should give you a framework on how you should approach life. And that's why those formative years are very important, because it builds, it doesn't determine how your life is, definitely builds on. And so, yeah, I just wanted to share that kind of to bring it full circle. But yes, no, my experience, I felt like I have the opportunity when I was in Columbia to change how people viewed education, how they viewed me, how they viewed men of color. And I think it was an opportunity that I'm still now doing, you know, as a professor.
That's incredible. And, you know, and you made mention of this, and I'll just touch on this before I move forward, you know, to present yourself in a way, and it's really does not align with the stereotypes that some people think, right? You know, it doesn't align with what you see on media. It doesn't align with what you read in the paper, you know. So all these things that you are shown, you know, is not necessarily who we represent, right? So now you're going to meet someone who carries themselves differently, someone who has a level of intelligence and mannerisms that should be respected. And I'm going to touch on what Sam said as well, of value, right? Of value, right? Now we've touched on so many areas. We've covered racial injustices, implicit bias, lack of faculty and administration, cultural norms, economics, All of that we covered. And we did a lot about certain things we should do to address it. I want to ask Josh, now, how do we look at certain things from our professional position, right? So Joshua, you worked in admissions for quite some time. In your experience, what are some of the challenges that Black and Latino males encounter coming into college? And do you feel this impacts their ability to complete? And also, what can we do to be more, to better assist them at the start?
Excellent question. I think a few of the issues our young men, women, everyone face when they enter college is the sense of belonging, and essentially connecting with someone immediately. You know, I work in admissions and recruitment. While I may not be the most important person in the college, I'm more than likely the first person that student interacts with at the college. I take that very serious. So I've represented multiple institutions throughout my career, but one thing that has remained consistent is myself and how I engage with others. So my goal is not to tell you you can't come here, but essentially, how do I get you here? Why are you here? So if you're here because you want to get a degree to make your mom proud, that's something we're going to carry on through your 4 years here or your 2 years here. So if a student comes to me and says, I feel like I can't do it, well, you got to do it for mom. This is why you're doing it. And that's me creating myself to be that mentor or that person or that foundation to constantly remind you why you're here and why you're doing it. What we need to do, I kind of, as I recruit, I try to form good relationships with students. So one of the best joys of being a recruiter or working in higher education is someone you recruit, you help them enroll, you maybe don't see them for 2-3 years, and then they come back and say, I graduated, thank you so much. And my favorite quote to say is, no, thank you, you did it. I just opened the door for you, you walked right in, you know, and that's kind of going back to the previous question is, you know, the reason why I took it so serious, because if I am the only one, then guess what? I'm gonna be the one that goes to the back door and opens it and lets the whole family in. That's me. That's how I viewed it. So if I'm the only Hispanic in the room, guess what? My job now is to represent us well, and then essentially welcome all of us into that room and create opportunities. So I think it's engaging with students, making sure they're comfortable, providing those resources early, even if they feel, I don't need tutoring. Well, I'm gonna let you know where tutoring is, who you reach out to and what they offer. Here's the library. Oh, I don't do the library. I don't read books. That's not cool. Okay, maybe you don't. But there's an interesting section on African American history, sports management, music history. Dive into something like that and kind of leverage your strengths, but also poke that pain. So as students go along and face challenges, constantly remind them why they're here, why they're doing what they're doing. And I think in the shuffle, we can forget about that, and students lose track. So having someone to go back to, so if the professor's not that person, someone else is, you have, hey, I remember the recruiter, Josh helped me out, or so-and-so, let me go back to him and see what I can do. Because essentially they will come back. If you open that door and leave it open and let them know, students will come back.
It's interesting. And, you know, as a professor, you know, I look at what I can do in the classroom, you know, what I can do from my position that I have in the classroom. And again, it's really trying to connect with, make the academic journey meaningful, make it something that they can engage in, make it something relevant, right? Help show that as a result of this, you get this. So this may be, you may be eligible for, or you may have an opportunity for as a result of this. So yes, the struggle is going to be there sometimes, you know, but the meeting the struggle, because if you leave, you still have a struggle. It's not necessarily that you leave school because you're struggling academically, that you're going to walk away and there's going to be no struggles elsewhere. There will always be struggles. Pick your battles. Fight the wars that will result in meaningful gains, right? And Sam, you made reference of this when it comes to materialistic things. So if I'm struggling to buy this whole new gear that's worthless once I buy it, right? You know, I already spent the money's gone, right? And yeah, I look good for the moment, but next year that's out of season, right? It's out of fashion, so there goes the money, and its value, you know, depreciates. The value of your degree appreciates. It will always present the opportunity for you to gain more. It will always present the opportunity for you to grow more, develop more, right? So it has a good ROI, return on investment. You know, if we look at it in that nature, you know. So let me ask you guys this: if you can name one factor or strategy that can help increase the graduate rate for Black and Latino males, what would it be? What would you say the one thing that needs to we have to do moving forward? Sam, you go first.
I think that one of the first things that we have to do is ask these students or question these students to learn what their interests are and show them how their interests parallels with the education that they're receiving. Mm-hmm. Because one of the biggest factors is that many times the correlation between interest and education can't be seen. So because that correlation can't be viewed, the disinterest sets in. Or because many times the teacher is the one who's leading the interest, and the interest is based on what the teacher feels the needs are, the student is somewhat left astray or left on the side. Ask the student, what are your interests? And show them how that interest aligns with the education, and develop the writing or whatever the strategy is for that course along with the interest, so that they can both run parallel, instead of the student thinking that their interest and what the course is designed for is somehow in conflict.
Josh, no, it doesn't matter. Josh or Kirsten, either one you can go. What would be something you would identify to be the a specific strategy or that you could mention?
I'll go first, Christian. Thanks. All right, so I have a few suggestions, so I might cheat on this question a bit. But one thing I would do is, and I mentioned this earlier, I would offer some sort of life skills course. Could be 0 credits, just a course where students are learning how to study, conflict resolution, stress management, time management, teaching them these basic things before they even embark on the journey. I would also attach students to a mentor, whether it's an alumni, a current higher level student, or even a professor. Maybe it becomes part of what a professor does while they work for an institution. You know, you mentor 10 students. What better way for a student to learn how to become Michael Goodwin than kind of learning under his wing? And then essentially, you know, you walk into McDonald's and all these places and they have set menus, but you can ask to change your burger. You can remove the cheese. You can add this, you can add mac sauce, whatever you want. Why can't we do something similar to degrees? So kind of piggybacking off of what Sam said, how can we cater a degree track that favors the student's strengths and skills, where it's favorable and purpose-centered? And I know that could take some time, and I know probably some higher level educators are cringing right now, but I think there's an opportunity there to kind of make the degree a flexible opportunity, and, you know, let the student determine the ingredients that get to the end. And us as educators are kind of the food inspectors and making sure they're passing through every necessary hoop. And at the end, you know, we sold our burger, the student gets a completed sandwich or burger as they see fit. So, you know, I'm clearly hungry, but I wanted to use that kind of metaphor. But I think degree flexibility is definitely something to consider.
Christian.
Well, I'm gonna say Sam and Josh really use a lot of the points I was gonna make, and again, well said. I would add, just to kind of reiterate, I would say we should give students the tools in real time on how to use their degree. whether that's internships when they first start in their first semester. But I think it's important that, whether that's changing the curriculum, and I know that takes more than 1 year, but I think they have to feel invested in what they're learning and understand how they can use it in their currently, and then also once they graduate. If they can see that, that'll increase graduation rates, that will help. It'll make it easier to recruit men of color into academia, both as a student and then potentially even as the instructor. And I think it's, I think those are some strategies that'll be helpful. But Josh and Sam said most of it, so just wanted to add those two.
And it's almost really opening up the parallel between MCNY's purpose-centered education and what you guys are mentioning, making it relevant, making it the connection between what you're learning and and how that's applicable, in your industry, in your career, in your profession, marrying the two, I'm going to throw out one question that I'm going to, that someone brought in. And I know we're getting close to the 7:30 mark. And if the question, and some of you may have touched on it, with respect to, and I'm going to take this and go somewhere else with it as well, but with respect to mentoring, we talked about that. Like, who was the person, and I want to say, in some sense, we look at the mothers, but who was the male? Or did you have a male in your life that kind of said, you know what, this is who I will listen to. This is who I want to follow. Who was the one, if you do have one, that was pretty much a voice to you? Sam, let's go back to you.
Yeah, and that question is so profound, and it's so, because when you ask that, the funny thing is that the males, and I'm going to say males plural, that had that impact on me were actually my peers while I was in prison. Like I said, they invited me, they brought me into higher education and showed me, and while we were in there, I still had some of the behaviors because it was a transition. And they would like, yo, hold on, what you doing? You're in college now. You have to act like a college student. And I'm like, well, we still in jail. And one of the things that they used to always harp on was that because you are in the circumstance doesn't mean you are the circumstance. They're two separate things. And it was a dude named Sean, a dude named Lawrence, a dude named Kenyatta, another dude named Douglas, a dude named Jermaine, and a few other dudes. Like, these dudes, I watched them, and these guys had significant amounts of more time to do than I did. But the way that they carried themselves, the way that they acted, they didn't say that I'm in jail getting an education. I'm in jail getting an education. What they said was that I'm a person getting an education. They took the prison out of it. They took the prison out of it. So once you took the prison out of it, it became a human experience and not a jail experience, not an institutional experience. It became a person experience. And once you put the person in the front of it, it became more viable. It became more real. It became more relatable. It became something that you wanted to be, because I think that all of us, and even when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all want to be the ultimate best person that we can be. So once you take the situation and the circumstance out of it and make it about the person, it gives us the ability And it gave me the ability to want to reach to those newer heights. So shout out to my peers who helped me at that time because they were my examples.
Awesome. Josh, anyone briefly that you have?
I'll say it was a village of, it takes a village, you know. There are multiple people. Unfortunately, I'll say this, a lot of the males in my life that did make an impact were kind of touch and go. So it could be, and I remember this as a kid, kind of wanting to hang out late and my mom telling me come up and I'm sucking my teeth and I'm pissed. And I remember certain people saying, listen, go ahead. You don't need to be out here. Stay out of here. You have bigger things ahead. Kind of like protecting me for no apparent reason. And these were people that would probably not look out for anyone else, you know? So appreciating that and understanding that and seeing that perspective of why is this person in this situation helping me? They see something in me that I don't see yet, or I'm respecting them as an older person and their experience, and they're saying, just trust me, go this route. But essentially that and my basketball coach in the 8th grade, I'm very stubborn. So when I wouldn't play, I would get really pissed off. And he held me accountable. He said, well, you're not doing the drills fully. You're missing layups, your free throws. You know, he held me accountable. And I was young, I was frustrated, but I went and worked on what I needed to work on. And that kind of taught me, well, people are going to call you out on your stuff regardless. So you need to make sure you're taking care of your business so no one ever calls you out and embarrasses you in that way. So essentially, I think it was a village of people at different points in my life, you know. So I'm grateful for everyone that I've come into and continue to come into contact with, because it never stops. And I think
Correct.
that's something we need to realize. We get older doesn't mean we stop learning or that we can't learn from each other. There's always something or a skill or a knowledge to obtain. So always remembering that and keeping open ears and open mind.
All right, Christian, briefly, who is there anyone?
Yeah, there were 4 when I was in St. John's. James Salnav, who was Associate VP of Student Affairs, Dr. Les Edmond, who was Director of African American Affairs at St. John's, Jamal Brown, who was the head of student life at St. John's, and Dr. McKenzie, who at the time was Dean of Academic Affairs and now is a Vice Provost at St. John's. And I like to call him, he's an everything man because he's just amazing. He actually wrote one of my letters of recommendation to Columbia and had a profound impact on my life. All 4 of them did. I mentioned earlier that I was president of student government at St. John's, was the first Black male to be elected. And what was unique about student government at St. John's was that it was incorporated as its own entity. So I had to, I was basically, we work for the people, of course, the students. But that management, that balance with management, with school leadership was interesting. And I relied on those for advice, and because they gave me a lot of strategic advice on how to carry myself as a Black man, number one. That helped. That made it a lot easier to focus on academia because I knew that someone looked like me, carried themselves a certain way, was highly respected. I wanted to emulate myself after them. And that was the connection that I needed. After that, it felt like the academics became a lot easier because I knew that I had people that I could look to for guidance.
Great. And I'm going to share, and again, because we're getting close to the end, so I'll share who mentored me, and I think he's on, and little does he know this. My brother, we lived in Brooklyn, and he went to school in New Jersey. We did not have a car, so he would take the train all the way out to New Jersey, and he would work at UPS at night. So school, UPS was in New York, school was in New Jersey, and we lived in Brooklyn. And I would watch him go through all these travels from this place to this place to this place, but he would not stop with his degree, and little does he know that I was like really watching him. I was like, wow. And I'd get up, go to the bathroom at 1 o'clock in the morning, and he's up with his head in the books, and that really motivated me. And and again, I never told him this, but it really set the example for me of how far you have to push yourself and how far you need to go, and it doesn't matter. And that's why I share this sometimes. When I went to MCNY, my undergrad and my grad, I lived in Pennsylvania. My internship was in New Jersey, and my class were in New York. So there'd be sometimes I'm going through 3 states in one day, but that was shown to me as a result of what my brother did. So unbeknownst to him, he really set an example for me on how you need to go and push yourself. So we're coming down to almost like the last few minutes. And 2 things I want to do. One thing I want to do is, again, thank everyone for coming. But what statement I want to make, and let's look again at culture. Is it our nature to speak out? And I'm speaking of men of color particularly. Is it our nature to speak out when we're having problems? Do we feel it will embarrass us if we don't understand? Do we feel uncomfortable asking professors for help or asking for additional help? Do we form alliances with each other, or do we push each other away? Do we support each other, or do we just walk away when times get tough? And to me, that is something that's a key point of changing this narrative. Is really beginning to work collectively. Is really beginning to join forces, as we are when a smaller group in higher education. Then to be small but separate does not help us collectively, right? We have to join. We have to come together. We have to work as one, right? So I encourage, I challenge, I empower, individuals, men of color, to not talk about sports as always the issue, not talk about who you dating is always the issue, not talk about where'd you get your kicks from as always the issue. Let's talk about some of the challenges we're having in getting this paper done. Let's talk about some of the challenges we're having when we want to quit, right? Turn to the next brother, say, yo, man, I'm ready. I don't know if I can do this anymore, right? And looking at, alum who have done the journey, right? And then you look back at our brothers that are still in the struggle, so to speak, right? Reaching out to them, motivating them, moving them, helping, empower and encourage them, So I definitely say this as a challenge. And Tina, if you can put my email in the box, in the chat box, it's mgoodwin@mcny.edu. Whoever wants to join forces with that, alumni, MCNY alumni, reach out to me and say, look, okay, let's start something. Let's get together and create something. Let's put something together to help each other. Because even though, yes, I have my master's, I'm getting ready to start my my PhD in September, right? So that means I'm still a student, So it's still the need to support and work together, to get this done, So that is my challenge, and that is something I feel that can help change the narrative. And then we can work through some of the racial inequities. We can work through some of the, challenges in academia. We can work through some of the challenges with trying to manage money, manage homes, and all these other things. We can work through that collectively, opposed to trying to do this on our own. And it's culturally that we feel we need to do that, but that's not fact. We don't have to do that, There's so much we can do collectively than we can do individually, So we have 3 minutes left. So guys, I want you to say your last, and before I close, I want to thank, let me first thank David Hahn, who is the tech on this. Thank Tina Giorgio, who was behind the scenes throwing everything in the chat. Thank Kenya Kirkland, who works in the development department with me as well. John Edwards, who helped put this out there as well. You know, everyone who played a part in making this happen and everyone who attended. Also, you know, MCNY, we are a nonprofit organization, and donations that can help us continue to help the students is definitely appreciated. So you can go on our website and you'll see alumni giving or just giving, and definitely anything you can do, you know, we will appreciate, you know. So we have 2 minutes left. So guys, last farewells. Thank you, and I'll let you start, Josh.
Well, I want to thank you, Professor Goodwin, for putting this group of great men together for us to have this great conversation. Honestly, and hearing us speak and dialogue, I realized, like, man, I could use a lot more of these type of conversations in my everyday circles and in life. So it was an honor to be here. I hope that everyone in the audience gained some valuable knowledge. I saw in the chat that there were some mothers here gaining knowledge as well. So that's excellent, because as you heard, you are our fire and you light us and lead us. So it's an honor to be here. And essentially, I think this aligns perfectly with the mission of MCNY and what needs to be done socially by our people. So I will continue fighting the good fight. And if Michael calls me again, I will be here ready to go. So thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here.
Christian.
Just wanted to say it was an absolute pleasure being here, being with Josh and Sam and hearing their perspectives. Just highly impressive, Mike. Thank you again for this opportunity. What I would say is, and follow up what you were saying, I think it's important that we normalize creating a support system for men of color across academia, across different universities. I think it's very important that we continue to support each other. As you're saying, the people in doctoral programs are like, we're still a student. I still have my ups and downs. And, you know, to answer your question, it is, I don't believe, you know, I can't say this with 100%, every single person fits into this statement, but it is not in our culture. I feel like we haven't been taught that it's okay to ask questions, you know, and say, this is bothering me, or I need support here, or this is something I find really interesting, you know, how about we collaborate on this? And that those things are not normalized. What is often normalized is gossip or making fun of folks, which doesn't help anybody. So I want to normalize empowering men of color to be our best selves and to encourage ourselves to take risk. You know, as if anyone's listening, what has helped for me, taking risks, I think is important, calculated, right? You don't want to just go out and win without thinking. But especially when folks tell you you can't do something or this is above your pay grade, no, that means you should actually zone in on that aspect and work hard, because nothing's going to be given to you. But by having that support system and working hard, there's nothing that we can't do. We are so resilient. We are so tough. We are intelligent. And having that group of support will only propel us further. That's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you. All right, Sam, last minute.
I want to first thank MCNY and thank you, Professor, for putting this platform together and giving us this opportunity. Joshua, Christian, hearing your views and getting a different lens to see things through is so important, and it was so great to hear that. One of the biggest things is that when we talk about assisting, and the word that I kept hearing repeated was help. And we have to break down for people what help looks like. And for me, help is how everyone learns potential, or how each person lifts another person. So when we break help down and we show it to people broken down, instead of just as this word that everybody, that most men of color are scared of. We are scared to admit our fragility in certain areas. We are scared to admit our weaknesses in certain areas because the environments that we predominantly come from is a predatory environment. So because of that, weakness is looked upon as an opportunity to get pounced on, whether it's to be pounced on emotionally, intellectually, or physically, or in all of those ways. So in order to not have that, we cover our weaknesses. And a lot of times we cover it with anger, or we cover it with quitting, or we cover it with inconsistencies. We cover it with not being present. So when we teach about help, and we teach the components of help, and we teach what help really is, we give ourselves a chance to say, hey, this is where I'm falling short at. This is where I'm not that strong at, and it not be seen as an opportunity for somebody to come in and use it against us.
Exactly. And again, thank you each one of you for sharing your knowledge, your experience, your encouragement. I'm sure everyone has gained something from this, as did I as well. You know, we are always in the learning process. And MCNY, we love you and thank you for giving us the opportunity to share on this platform. And everyone, thank you for joining us this evening. And again, Goodwin at mcny.edu. Become part of the solution, become part of the change of the narrative, become part of what we can do to make it different. Okay? Look forward to hearing from you and look forward to the next time. Good night, everyone. Thank you so very much.